Welcome to the past, present, and future session for the Military Interstate Children's Compact Commission. There will be three of us presenting information to you, and we're going to take a minute to introduce ourselves. I am Susan Haberstroh, and I'm the former commissioner from the state of Delaware. I served as the commissioner from 2008 when Delaware joined until my retirement from the Delaware Department of Education in 2022. I am going to now ask that Commissioner Greg Lynch introduce himself.
My name is Commissioner Greg Lynch from Washington. I've been the commissioner of the compact for Washington since around 2009. I'm also a retired superintendent as of last year in 2022, having served as both a school district superintendent and also a regional superintendent in the Washington State public education system. I'm also a retired Army colonel. I will be followed by Rosemary Krager.
Hello, my name is Rosemary Krager, and I'm superintendent of Middletown Public Schools in Rhode Island. Our military connection is really our Newport Navy base, and I have been the first commissioner for Rhode Island and the only commissioner since Rhode Island joined the commission in 2010. It was an easy legislation to pass in Rhode Island because the military have been part of the fabric of our community for many, many years.
Next slide. So here's our agenda for today. We're going to be talking about our past, the history of the Interstate Compact, present, MIC3 today, future, and then we're going to have reflections from the three of us. So what is MIC3? You'll hear MIC3, MIC3, Military Interstate Children's Compact. What those initials, that acronym stands for formally is the Interstate Compact for Educational Opportunity for Military Children. A compact is essentially a contract between states allowing governments to work collaboratively to address issues or concerns across boundaries. One of our documents indicates that MIC3 is the sixth compact in 50 years to be adopted by all 50 states and DC. This compact became operational with at least 10 states signing on through their legislatures. This threshold was reached in 2008 with 11 states passing legislation. The Council of State Governments, or CSG, in cooperation with the U.S. Department of Defense, drafted this Interstate Compact to address some of the educational challenges transitioning children of military families face. Around July 2006, CSG worked with a variety of federal, state, and local officials, as well as national stakeholder organizations representing education groups and military families to create the new interstate agreement. The compact and language was developed with the understanding that most military families move every 2 to 3 years and some even more frequently. For a military child, it's possible to have moved 10 times by the time they're 12 and to change schools 6 to 9 times between kindergarten and graduation. With 50 states and DC, and within those states, varying education systems, entrance ages, enrollment requirements, education programs, special programs, and graduation requirements, transitioning schools from state to state was often difficult and not easy to navigate. The intent was really to provide consistency across states and to avoid conflict with existing state codes where possible. The compact is not exhaustive and does not cover every area that a student or family may encounter, but it does address the key issues encountered by eligible military families in the area of enrollment, placement, and graduation. In addition, the compact provides for detailed governance structure at both the state and national levels with built-in enforcement and compliance mechanisms. When you think about the characteristics of states, from their number of military students to the number of districts and schools and governance structures, the complexity of state legislatures, it is incredible to think that all 50 states plus DC were on board by 2014. Amazingly, 50% was reached in the second year of 2009. Next slide. So we're going to talk a little bit about the present, MIC3 today. Where are we now and how did we get here? One aspect is our national office. Since 2016, our national office has been led by our current executive director, Sharice Amai, supported by 2 staff, including a training and operations associate and a communications associate. The national office has been instrumental in support to our states from the development of resources, coordination of meetings, and resolutions of cases, as well as expanding the knowledge of the compact to states through training and coordination with other partnering agencies. One of the aspects is tracking the strategic plans and working to make sure the deliverables of those plans are accomplished. Also, through the national office and our commissioners, the mission, vision, and value and shared commitment statements were developed to guide our work and strategic planning. Next slide.
As a compact organization, we're guided by major pieces: mission, vision, and values. And I'd like to point out, if you focus on mission, talked about support of children in military families. So we exist basically to help families and students transition to public education. I think it's important to also understand that in addition to our military families, the compact also includes members of the Uniform Public Health Services, NOAA, and also the United States Coast Guard. And just recently, the Space Force has joined us, although under the Department of Defense, our purpose continues to grow as we continue to add basically families through military or uniform service. I want to focus just a minute on the values and particularly transparency. While we believe that we're guided by our rules and state statute, we also think it's important to find ways to say yes to help our military families transition from state to state. And I'll explain a little bit more about what that looks like in the following slides. Next slide, please. One of the things that we would like to remind our public education military uniform partners is that we certainly value staying focused on things that make the difference for our children. And so there's a lot of times that we talk about complex issues involving states transitions, but we always keep in mind that the compact really is about smoothing transition, for our children from state to state. We've got a number of partners that we'll talk about, some of which I mentioned a few minutes ago. Those partnerships are exceptionally important. Not only do they include our uniform and military families and the 50 states plus DC, but we also have a number of members that are ex officio members, like the Department of Defense education activity, that plays a major role in transitioning students not only from their system, but into public education systems throughout the United States. Next slide, please. There's a couple things that I'd like to point out that has to do with professional growth of the organization and the individuals. That would be the commissioners that support the compact in each one of our states. We are focused on professional development in ways that'll help us grow. We like to regularly assess our performance and progress. And as a result, we expect participation from commissioners in a number of things, like surveys that are regularly sent out from the national headquarters, participation in tier group meetings, and also participation in the various committees that comprise the national organization. Next slide, please.
So I will take care of this slide and talk about the great things about MIC3 and where we are today. Many of the commissioners with their state councils, along with our national office, are really the lifeline or the heartbeat of the organization success with the compact. As I mentioned before, several of our commissioners have served for many years, myself being since 2010 when Rhode Island joined the commission. Each commissioner serves on an essential committee, and several of our commissioners have had critical roles in serving on our executive committee and serving as committee chairs. I served as the chair for training when I first came aboard, and we were just growing then, and the training now, just like these webinars, has just really expanded so much. I want to thank personally the individuals in these leadership roles for their time and commitment to serve, because it does, aside from the job that we all have, it does take a commitment to serve on these committees and be chairs and be part of the executive committee. We can't do this alone. This is a compact that is limited in scope, but we work with partners and our ex-officiary members to not only communicate the compact and the provisions to our families, but to provide support for our families and students as their programs grow. Over the years, we've had commissioners have individual initiatives. Our commissioner from Ohio, for instance, has championed the Purple Star program, and I know is always available to states if they're interested in particular in that program. For some states, the Purple Star program works perfectly. For other states, the state might be small and it doesn't quite work. In Rhode Island, currently, we do not have a Purple Star program. What we all have, and we celebrate in April, is Purple Up for Month of the Military Child. And that, even in the small state of Rhode Island, generates a lot of enthusiasm. We have bridges lit up in purple for Purple Up for Military Month. Our state Commissioner of Education sends out information about our military students. So it has been just a group coming together to recognize the service of our military families. Over the years, we have worked with the training committee, our outreach committee, and just the number of resources that we have with our partners. Our school liaison officers are a key to the success of the compact in every state. Again, you know, from Rhode Island's point of view, I depend on my school liaison officer to be the front line to our military families that come into our state. Also, what guides our work is the strategic plan. We had our first strategic plan. It was adopted in 2016, and the format changed a bit just as organizations grow and learn. We have a current plan that's from 2020 to 2022 with key accomplishments that we have outlined in all of the resources that you find on our website. Our strategic plan has shifted as an organization because we've grown as an organization and have matured. The fundamental thing, though, is the strategic plan drives the work that we do and supports the growth and the sustainability of our compact. Next slide. I will continue with this in particular. We have what's the future for MIC3, and really we have honed in on culture, fidelity, and education. In terms of that, we want to build relationships with all our stakeholders. So that means all of our ex-officiary members, but it also means when you look at your own state, what is, who are the stakeholders in the education of our military families, children, and families. So we talk about the relationship we have with the registration office in a school district, with our guidance counselors, with our, in particular, our high school guidance counselors in terms of transition and graduation, and also with our special education department. We want to equip our future leaders in our commission. So our commissioners who come aboard, we like to say, okay, we have a bench here, and we tap on their particular skills and skill sets that they have to help lead many of the initiatives that we have, particularly around our committee work. And we usually have a chair and a vice chair. Again, building a bench for leadership. Then Commissioner Lynch is going to talk about fidelity, what that means to our organization. Commissioner Lynch?
Yeah, thank you, Rosemary. The fidelity, I think, is an important part to keep in mind when we talk about what the compact brings to the table in supporting military families. I think what we've learned, particularly over the last 15 years, is that each one of our states are different because public education basically is a sovereign issue entertained by each one of the 50 states in Washington, D.C. So from a fidelity standpoint, what we try to really focus on are the administrative rules and also the statutes that every state has agreed to support. What I found personally over the years is that MIC3, the compact, isn't necessarily well understood by all the stakeholders, and it's easy sometimes to drift from the fundamental purpose of what the compact is all about. And so the highest common denominator really are those rules and that statute that we all agreed to basically follow. And so the promulgation of the compact, in terms of just focusing fundamentally on transitioning a family into the public education system, has guided at least my work well in Washington State. As an example, we've got members from the Army, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, Public Health Services, NOAA, and both the National Guard and Reserve in Washington State. And so what we try to do is focus on those common things, regardless of where the service member works, whether or not it's one of the uniformed services or whether or not it's the National Guard or Reserve if members are activated. And so I would encourage commissioners, the new commissioners particularly, as they think about promulgation of the compact, to really stay focused on what those fundamental tenets are, some of which we talked about previously. I'll be followed by Susan to talk about education.
Thank you, Commissioner Krager and Commissioner Lynch. So I'm going to focus on two areas, and we've talked some about this already, and that's training state schools and staff to support military connected students, and then the resources. The compact can't be exercised without knowledge by those that are impacted. So when we think about those that are impacted, we think about the education community, we think about the military family, we think about the military installations and leadership. So the training piece really becomes critical, and that's where a lot of our focus has been over the last 15 years, is to ensure that as state commissioners and our constituent groups that we work with have the resources to support making sure the training is provided. We do work a lot with our partner, with other advocacy groups, such as the Military Child Education Coalition, National Military Family Association, Military Impacted Schools Association. I'm sure I'm going to leave some people out, so I'm just going to stop right there. But making sure that we have the information out to our partners so that they can share. Rosemary, talked about the school liaison. The school liaison is a critical component because they're the ones, quite honestly, that a lot of the families who are under a permanent change of station order talk to first. So that communication piece, the training, is so critical. I also want to let everyone know who is attending this is that our national office provides resources at no charge and also is available to do training. That training could be in person or it could be in a virtual setting. But again, it's available. we need to make sure that all of those that are impacted by this compact are aware of it, so that our military connected students actually have that seamless transition as they move from state to state. Next slide. The last part of this webinar is state reflections. So I will go ahead and start. Again, I was a former commissioner from the state of Delaware. I was with the Delaware Department of Education, and you'll realize that our commissioners are from different areas. Some are from the education side, some are from the military side, some are from other areas. But again, that's what really helps us as an organization learn from each other. In Delaware, as mentioned, legislation was signed in July 2008. We are a Tier 4 state, which just really means that we're a small tiered state with identified eligible students under 2,000 and below. So what we look different than a state like Texas or California, Pennsylvania. And as a state commissioner, it's the role of the state commissioner to ensure that the compact is applied and works for us. Delaware has one major military installation, and that's the Dover Air Force Base. And then we have a National Guard main headquarters in the northern part of the state. In Delaware, as a state commissioner, I was contacted less than 10 times. In other states, you'll find that the commissioners are contacted a lot more often than that. So I always like to think that this means one of two things: that our schools and districts know how best to support our families and students, or that our families may not know about the compact. I like to think it's the first, is that our schools and districts are doing the right thing that supports our families. But again, it goes back to training. I'm going to beat that drum, is that we have to make a concerted effort to train our schools and those that are impacted by this compact. In closing, for Delaware, communications on the provisions will always be what makes the compact relevant and strong. People change positions, retire, and so providing information to our schools, school counselors, military families, local school boards, PTOs, PTAs will continue to be the one of the number one strategies. And I am going to defer to Commissioner Krager.
Well, thank you. As I said in the opening, I am superintendent of schools in Middletown, Rhode Island. Middletown is heavily packed with military families. We serve Newport Navy Base. There are two other communities, each beside me, Newport and Portsmouth, that have a number of military students as well. My aha moment was when I realized in Rhode Island how many of our families serve as reservists, and the impact the reserve when our families go to active duty, the impact they have, and they are not identified in the reserve, are not identified as our military when we register. So we have to ask that question, or in training with our superintendents and principals and guidance counselors, make them aware that there could be families that are reserve and are going on active duty, and to be sensitive to those particular families. I have to say, I have been a teacher here for a number of years, and then moving to principal, and then moving to administration. And I always wondered, why do we need a compact? We've been dealing so well with our military families. But when we joined, the compact it gave us permission in our districts to make those accommodations and follow the particular things that our military students and families did deserve. So, and it provided for smooth transitions and training. One of the big benefits that I have found being a commissioner with the military interstate compact is the relationships you build with the other commissioners across the country and district of excuse me, District of Columbia. So when you do have a situation, in Rhode Island, we've only had 3. One was a special ed and 2 were about really grade placement. But when you do have something that bubbles up to the commissioner level, you know who that commissioner is because you've made that connection at our annual business meetings and you feel comfortable calling them. You know what they're doing. You've networked with them in our business at our business meetings, and you can really resolve resolve whatever issue there is very quickly. Just recently, we had one of our families move from Middletown to Hawaii, and they left early. They had orders to leave early, so the student didn't complete their year here in a high school level, but and when they went to Hawaii, that student, by the whatever was going on in Hawaii, would have had to repeat that particular grade. I was able to pick up the phone, call that commissioner, describe the situation. We got what that school district needed, got what Hawaii needed to place that student appropriately. So that to me has been one of the best advantages of MIC3, just that networking piece. So I'll pass on to Greg, I guess.
Yeah, I had mentioned before, I had been Washington commissioner now for about 15 years. I'm the first and only commissioner. And having had the benefit of serving as a school district superintendent in one of the largest school districts in the state of Washington for about a decade, and that as a regional superintendent for almost the same length of time, combined with nearly 30 years of active duty and retired as an Army colonel, with have experienced the situations that really the compact exists for. I've got a different perspective in terms of how impactful the compact is being, not only in the state of Washington, but across the United States. Washington is the 7th largest state in terms of the uniform connected population that are serving inside the state. So I've got the bookend of what you've heard Susan and Rosa Marie talk about in terms of scale and size. We've got a number of bases and forts in Washington. Joint Base Lewis and McChord on the west side of the state services thousands of military families. And then Fairchild Air Force Base on the eastern side of the state likewise services thousands of families. So having had the opportunity to be the commissioner for 15 years, I reflect on some of the challenges that we've had. And it always has to do with really the communications in terms of what is available for military family members and how do schools communicate compact type related information. And in Washington, there's 295 school districts and about 1,200,000 children. And about 27,000 of those children in public education system are uniform connected children. So one of the biggest challenges is really to keep parents and educators informed about the compact business. One of the lessons learned over the years was that you're required to have a state council, and when the state joined the compact and the legislature passed participation in the compact for each one of our states, you promise to have at least one state council meeting annually. And what I've found over the years is the composition of that council is exceptionally important. The minimum participants are enumerated as part of the compact itself. We've expanded that council in Washington state to include ex officio members of the State Board of Education, the Interscholastic Association, and also the PTA. We're also fortunate that we've got 4 legislators that are on the state council. 2 representatives from the House, 2 representatives from the Senate on either side of the aisle. So we've got a nice political mixture of basically the lawmakers that passed the compact plus other ex officio members that I just mentioned that have become disciples and really key communicators about the compact with their specific constituents. Uh, PTA, Parent Teacher Association, is a good example of being able to communicate what the compact is all about to a number of parents throughout the state that belong to that association. And I found that rather effective. The numbers of meetings that you have, I think, is important to contemplate. Again, by statute, you're required to have one meeting. What we've been able to do over the years in Washington State is to reduce the number of meetings down to essentially one annually. But we also are very, very diligent around collecting data from the school districts that support the majority of the uniform members in our public school system. And so we're fortunate over the last 15 years to have collected a large amount of longitudinal data that talks about how school districts are implementing the compact and how our uniform service member partners are dealing with communicating the compact to their family members. And having that data available for the state councils meeting to be able to periodically review on a regular basis really kind of helps us continue to get better at what we do, but we base it upon data. And one of the things I talked about early on in the mission and vision and values is that we do value data. And that's both nationally, and that's an example at our state level, how we value data to get not only the word out about the compact, but really how we assess our effectiveness.
Just to build on what Greg and Susan have said, with the state councils, we only meet once a year. As I said, our school liaison officer really handles any small issues that might come up. But what I do as commissioner, when the MIC3 newsletter comes out, I share that with all of our state council and with our state superintendent. So any communication that comes out of the national office, I attempt to share that information even to all of our to our district superintendents because of the National Guard piece. So that's part of a job as a commissioner and also as a state council.
I think what Rosemarie talked about in terms of that engagement is incredibly important. I had mentioned the fact that we've got other organizations inside the state that help basically promote the compact. We also have got really strong partnerships with the commanders of the installations that we serve. And I think involving either the general officer, or in some cases it may be a colonel-based commander or an admiral or Navy base, who become part of our state meeting every year. It helps them engage not only the council members that include legislators on the committee, but it also helps the committee members understand from the military perspective how well we're promulgating the compact. So over the years, we've made it a practice as part of our annual meeting to include one of those generals or admirals and basically provide either a 10 or a 15-minute update on their particular service and talk a little bit about how the compact is working from their perspective. And so this coming October, when we have our annual meeting as an example, we've invited the new Space Force commander to talk a little bit about what Space Force means. Not only how it's going to interface with public education, but then how it also fits within the military itself. And I think that sort of involvement not only keeps interest, but again, I think it helps basically communicate the importance of the compact. I mentioned DODEA, the Department of Defense Education Activity, another example of a valuable partner periodically we've invited to our state meetings. There's also a number of other ex officio members in the national committee that we try to also include in our state level meetings. Military Family Council, as an example for the United States, we often invite them to our annual meetings. So I guess one of the reflections and lessons learned to reinforce is to the extent that you can include more members or more attendees as part of those state meetings. It really does help with communications and it helps that mutual support and to build partnerships.
Thank you for joining us today. We really hope that you learned something from the presentation. I know that as a former state commissioner, that anytime I'm with other commissioners, I learn something that I can take back to my state. Really, it's about communication, relationships, and the sharing of best practices. So thank you again.